Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thanks for turning up. We're going to begin very shortly. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great, wonderful.
Yes.
Okay, folks, thank you very much for coming to the PIDE webinar. This we think is a very important webinar because, quite frankly, we have to think about the internet, because life without the internet is very, very difficult, as you can imagine in these days of COVID. So let me begin the webinar and invite everybody to, no, what's happening? Where am I going wrong? क्या है यार, इस पे स्क्रीन शेयरिंग क्यों नहीं हो रही? मेरे कंप्यूटर का प्रॉब्लम है। ओके, there it is. Okay, folks. Okay, folks, thank you very much. I'm very glad that we got a very good panel. And inshallah, we got another panel for tomorrow. We'll inshallah crack this nut open. Let me begin by saying that we have a growth framework, a growth strategy, जो असद उमर साहब ने, Minister of Planning, और बाकी लोगों ने काफी क्या कहते हैं appreciate किया, and I think Planning Commission is going to use some of it in their work. We put up front and center there internet for all. And the reason being हमारा recent experience, क्योंकि हमने कोविड के ज़माने में हम पढ़ाते हैं तो और ये वेबिनार्स वगैरह करते हैं, तो कोविड के ज़माने में हमें obviously एक चीज़ समझ आ गई, and I feel very ashamed to say कि COVID had to teach us this, कि जी इंटरनेट के बगैर गुजारा नहीं है, and that distance learning is now the future, and that we should, these webinars are the future because it allows us to exchange information very readily. तो हमने जब ये किया तो देखा है कि जी बच्चे जो हमारे बेचारे पढ़ते हैं वो इंटरनेट हैंडीकैप्ड है, and internet has become a class divide now. Rich people have internet, poor people don't have good internet access. So that is why we coined this phrase internet for all, and we've been touting this and pushing this. So we need your help in unpacking this issue. I've got a great panel today. Let me just introduce the panel, then I'll move on. We've got Muhammad Ali Ibrahim, who's the head of communications in Mobilink. Then we've got Zuhair Khalik. Zuhair Khalik has been the head of many mobile companies, well-known media person, well-known in telephony and internet person, respected all over the world. So wonderful to have you here. Then we got Parez Istikhar, who was also the head of PTA, and again a very well-known personality. So we are very glad to have him here. Then we got Saad.
So just one correction: I've got nothing to do with PTA.
But weren't you at one point the head of PTA?
No, sir. I was head of Universal Service Fund.
Okay.
Which is yeah.
Which is what? Which is sorry.
Which is responsible for taking telecommunications to areas that are unserved otherwise.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, good. And then there's Muzaffar Baraj. He's a Chief Technology and Information Officer in PTCL. So we got a great panel. I'll just give you a short intro of where we are, and then we'll move forward. A kid in PID, a student, Waqar Yunus, prepared these slides. And I wanted him to present them, but he says he's in Swat and therefore not capable of doing them because the internet is unreliable and he can't do it. So that's kind of underscores the problem that we are facing, and that's why I've invited this massive human capital to try and help us understand this. अब वो जो बताता है, which is very important, उसने collect किया data from all over. IMF कहता है 89% of the population in Pakistan cannot afford internet. That means जो हमारे बच्चे हैं जो हमारे साथ पढ़ते हैं वो तो बेचारे हैंडीकैप हो गए ना, उनकी तो क्लासें भी नहीं ठीक होती, उनसे होमवर्क भी नहीं होता वगैरह. So I think it's a national emergency as far as I can see. अच्छा, दूसरा, Pakistan ranks 90th out of 120 countries on the Inclusive Internet Index. Now that's again a startling figure. Then the third point is that Pakistan falls into the last quartile of the global internet countries, ranks 24th out of 26 Asian countries. So my friends, इसलिए मैं आपको ज़हमत दे रहा हूँ कि हमें बताइए क्या करें. Limited population enjoys internet access. 40% of Pakistan is using internet. With 60% kids, 40% are using internet. That's again not a statistic that I enjoy. World Bank data says KG 17% of individuals don't have internet in Pakistan. Then PTA figures are 183 million cellular subscribers, but उनमें से 3G, 4G बहुत कम है, 98 हैं. 2 million have basic, whatever. So, I mean, unfortunately, the picture is not good, and you will think about it. 61.34 million internet users, but it's increasing, but not fast enough. Internet penetration stands at 27.5%. So we will try and analyze this data and put it out. ये और चीजें हैं. So हमारा जो मसला है ये कि ऑनलाइन और वर्चुअल लाइफ तो अब रियलिटी हो गई है. हमें टीचिंग बहुत सारी हमने इस साल की है, from young kids, 4-year-old kids to PhD, everything is online, and many people are suffering because they just don't have the internet. So we would like you to educate us कि ये कैसे problem solve होगा. Is it because we are inefficient? Is it because we don't have the money? Is it because the private sector and the government cannot understand what the responsibilities are? Is it that they can't communicate or coordinate? And is it because we are a poor country? तो ये मैं तो इसका कोई जवाब नहीं दे सकता. I'm waiting for you guys to unravel it. So I'll urge all of you to try and tell us what to do. So if you can each take whatever time you require, and then we'll go in for a question and answer session. But try and be as brief as possible so that we can get, a lot of wisdom from you. So with that, let me turn to Mr. Zuhair Khalid. Zuhair Saab, can you please start the proceedings?
Thank you, Nadeem. It is indeed a very, very serious issue that we are facing. And I think, as you rightly said, it took the last year of COVID to kind of highlight the situation of what the country really needs at this point in time. Now, all the numbers and figures that you've quoted are there. They're on the PTA website. They're official numbers, which everybody works by. But I think given the numbers are 180 some million mobile connections. Everybody agrees that maybe about 130 million of those are actually unique one time. The rest are duplicates of people using more than one connection. About 100 million in what is called 3G, 4G connections. I think that's where we start to question whether we're really making sense or not. I suspect that anecdotally, again, for me, if you drive down the motorway from here to Lahore, it works beautifully. But if you take a turn to any place off that motorway, you're suddenly in what is used to be called 2G territory. And you can barely make a call, let alone have an internet connection. So there is a missing link here somewhere. And I think a lot of it has to do with the investment requirements, the way we are looking and approaching the whole need for internet. When you look at the policymakers and the regulators, we're still treating this as a luxury item, as we do mobile phones and tablets and iPads and so on. We look at this as something that is a luxury which not everybody should be able to afford. And at the same time, we will tax the heck out of it so that we can, benefit from the import and so on. All of that adds up to the situation that you've just described. Now, what do we need to do about it? I'm sure we'll spend the next, 45 minutes to an hour to listen to everybody saying it. My take on this is that We all need to wake up. It's not a luxury. It's a necessity. It's actually a, it's one of those things which is as important today as water, air, and food for everybody. And we've realized this over the last 14 or 15 months. It certainly helps to make life for everybody easier. We need to stop thinking of internet as something which gives us access to just, Facebook, YouTube, Google, and so on, TikTok, whatever. And think about the potential of internet, the real potential. The real potential, what I call an enabling environment, is to enable our country, our people, to actually access health, education, agri-tech, e-commerce, fintech, all of those things that we use as buzzwords. In reality, we are a nation of 222 million people today. And, again, to use some numbers, about 130 million are young people. These are people below the age of 30. They are far more prone to actually, take up the internet and whatever is available on it. I think it's our duty to be able to push that through as opinion makers like ourselves, perhaps, the regulators, the policy makers, more importantly, also the providers, the cellular mobile service providers, the internet providers, also seem to, and I'm sorry, I've been in this thing for about 30 years now, and I'm sorry if I'm criticizing some of my colleagues and friends, but we also need to take a different approach to what we think is availability of internet. And I think enough has not been done in that either. Having said all of that, when you talk about affordability, I was looking at some numbers the other day, and again, I think these are from a PTA report or a GSMA report. We are actually cheaper in terms of a gigabyte of data availability compared to Bangladesh, compared to Turkey, compared to India, and Egypt, and what I would call countries with similar demographics. So we are actually much cheaper, in fact, shockingly cheaper. So that may or may not be the entire reason. The other reason would be, as I mentioned earlier, the devices, and those are certainly not affordable by everybody. So those are some of the things I think we should try and discuss today. I'm not going to take everybody's time on this, but I think I'm sort of laying out the issues which we might want to discuss and see where we get to. Thank you.
Thank you, Zuhair Saab. Parvez Saab, would you go next and tell us, build on this and tell us what we can do to move forward?
Yes, sir, certainly. You said it's distance learning. I say it's distance everything. Actually, nowadays, you buy, you sell, you entertain, you do your banking, everything is on the net. So even if there was no COVID, and I'm sure, hopefully, inshallah, COVID will go away very soon, and we realize that everything is going to stay on the internet. And internet has become, you said, a class divide. Actually, internet was supposed to be the great equalizer, because when you teach on internet, when somebody delivers a lecture, it goes to rich and poor equally the same. But unfortunately, you're right, because of this divide of some people have it and some people not, it has become an issue. As Zuhair Saab rightly said, affordability is not really an issue. Actually, I don't know how it came up in your presentation, but affordability, Pakistan is doing pretty well, and thanks to the competition, thanks to the intense competition between the operators. Of course, sometimes it is at the cost of quality, that is for sure. We do not have the same quality as we should have, but affordability is not a big issue. The problem is availability. It's not there. Either it's not there, or it's there in such a bad quality that it's not good enough for students to do their learning, for example. It was mentioned Pakistan is 90th on the Internet Inclusive Index of EIU. What is even worse is that we are not just 90th, we are behind India, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. They're all ahead of us. So this, I think, is even more alarming, because when we say Pakistan maybe is poor and that's why we are bad, it's not that, because they're also poor, and they're also, some are poorer, in fact, Nepal, for example. And it's not just economic EIU index. I mean, if you look at other indices, I look at Network Readiness Index, I look UNCTAD's e-commerce index. We are behind all these countries: Bangladesh, India, Sri Lanka, Iran, Thailand, Malaysia. If you look at UN Department of Economic and Social Sciences e-government development index, we are behind Myanmar, Nepal, Bangladesh, India. If you look at telecommunication infrastructure index of UNDSA, we are behind DESA. We are behind India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Myanmar. If you look at World Economic Forum index of 141 countries, where we are 110th, behind Nepal, Bangladesh, Iran, Sri Lanka, India. If you look at ITU's ICT Development Index, the last one, unfortunately, is from September 2019, not very latest, but still, we are behind Bangladesh, Nepal, Myanmar, India. So it's not just one index, it's every index which has anything to do with internet, we are placed badly. So that is where the situation is right now. And I would slightly disagree with Zohair Saab. The internet is good. We call it good on motorways and big cities, but it is good in only patches. Otherwise, it's not even good on Lahore Pindi motorway. So what is wrong? There are so many things which are wrong, but let us take I will just finish with the two of the basic ingredients, let me call them, of internet. One is the wired part, which is on internet, where internet uses optical fiber cables, and the penetration of our optical fiber cables, the penetration of optical fibers in Pakistan is so pathetic that approximately 10% mobile towers are connected with optic fiber cables, whereas just for comparison, Thailand is 90%, Malaysia is about 40%, Vietnam 35%, India 30%, even Bangladesh 27%. So yes, in urban areas there is now a big race to do something about it, but that's too slow, too late, and too less. So that is the wired part. Come to the wireless part. Now, what does wireless need? Wireless needs spectrum. Spectrum is released by the government. The government releases spectrum and puts it on auction, and then the operators supposedly bid, take part in the auction and bid for the highest price. Now, the spectrum released in Pakistan is less than, I think, in the entire world, at least those countries that matter. So I don't know what we are going to do with keeping the spectrum, because keeping it and not releasing it and not using it actually makes it lose its economical value. If today the spectrum is not used, then the economic value which it would have produced today is gone. So spectrum is hoarded in a way that scarcity is created in the market, so that operators pay up more. From 2014, there have been 3 auctions: 14, 16, and 17. And every auction, what happened was that there was no bidding. The final price was the floor price. The floor price was so high that nobody actually bid. In 2014, some spectrum was left unsold. And in fact, in 16 and 17, what was sold was the unsold spectrum of 2014, which means no new spectrum has been released by the government after 2014. So these are some of the realities why the internet, where we stand today as with respect to internet, and what the possible reasons are. There are many reasons, but this is, I would just sum up as the main 2 things.
Thank you, Ji. Thank you. So there are a number of issues. Yes, we are doing badly, but I don't want to do badly because our children will suffer. We will all suffer. As you said, everything is distance. तो बताइए जी मुझे इब्राहिम साहब, आप मोबिलिंक से हैं, आप बताइए आपका क्या ख्याल है, what can we do about this? Ibrahim Saab, do you agree with all this?
Thank you, Dr. Naveem, for this opportunity. And, of course, absolutely, whatever has been said by my fellow esteemed panelists, I think very critical points. And I do agree that, yes, there are multiple areas that we need to address. But I just like to take another route. We all agree that, yes, the world of today is more connected than ever. And I think internet is one of the most powerful and pervasive platform that is making this happen. But at the same time, I think what I would like to stress upon is कि जो pandemic जिससे हम गुजर रहे हैं right now. So one thing that has really come out is that the overall global pandemic has further jolted this digital transformation जो हम बात करते हैं multiple sectors की. आपने शुरू किया था बात about कि हम डिजिटल लर्निंग की बात कर रहे हैं, हम हेल्थ सेक्टर की बात करते हैं कि where people are taking on health consultations, agriculture उसमें टेक्नोलॉजी यूज हो रही है, e-commerce, everything. So I think what this has done is it has made it indispensable for individuals as well as organizations to adapt to the new normal sooner rather than later. So what does this mean? I think, yes, we can talk about challenges and we will definitely do that during the course of the discussion. But at the same time, if we talk about specifically, how do we treat this? Do we take this as an opportunity, as a wake-up call? कि हाँ भी ठीक है, जो pandemic से पहले, maybe yes, the challenges were still there. But I think the pandemic actually forced us to employ two different means. Just on the education side, people काफी edtech initiatives थे जो successful थे, but nobody, except for a few exceptions, nobody was able to really take force in the mainstream of operations. But during the COVID pandemic, students had to resort to online remote learning. Teachers had to teach online. हमारी मीटिंग्स आज हम वेबिनार कर रहे हैं, we're talking to another sitting geographically distance apart. So I think previously was this the case where people were actually used to coming face to face and having that kind of. So I'm not going to contemplate कि भाई उसके benefits क्या है, but I think the pandemic forced us to see कि भाई using remote connectivity technology, it actually forced us to think in another way. And now going forward, the pressing need is that, yes, we agree that in the last year and a half, there are multiple studies जिसमें हम बात करते हैं कि भाई the COVID pandemic has actually fast-tracked the overall requirement of digital technologies or the internet requirements by 5 years. PTA last year, I was reading somewhere, overall surge internet की 15% की. So these are very healthy figures. 89% was quoted as a growth of internet usage in broadband as of last quarter 2020. So all these figures are actually pointing in the right direction. Yes, the need is really now. So what I think, what I would like to present as going forward as a discussion is going forward, the new normal, do we still, once inshallah things go back to normal, maybe if we talk about education, do we still go to the traditional face-to-face component, or maybe we can embark on a hybrid model where we have some face-to-face component and as well as a distance learning model? So what will mean that people, children who are actually sitting in far-flung areas, they can still continue education if they have access to internet. तो उससे क्या होगा कि आपके जो बाकी providers हैं, they can save up some operational costs, which can be again diverted to the provisioning of internet. जिस तरह से प्रवेश साहब ने बात की, जोर साहब ने भी कहा कि जहाँ जहाँ हमारे पास connectivity के issues हैं, challenges, so those can be then financed through those issues. As a representative of the finance industry, again, there are very, very, what do you say, promising figures in terms of how people have resorted to the branchless banking. काफी ज्यादा एकदम से growth आया है in excess of 30% in the way that people have been employing digital transactions, and that is primarily because of those forced lockdowns that we experienced in the last year and a half. कि भाई चीजें नहीं open थी, but at the same time business went on for usual, but people resorted to digital means, digital payments वगैरह हुई, and there was a phenomenal growth. So I think I would like to present this side of the picture. Yes, there is a wake-up call which the pandemic forced us to think, and now we need to see how we can contribute in terms of the requirements that are coming forth from the country. Thank you.
Thank you जी. अच्छा जी, वराज साहब आप जरा बताइए कि माशाल्लाह ये PTCL में आप हैं, इंटरनेट ज़ुहैर साहब ने कहा कि चीप है. आई थिंक मोबाइल शायद चीप है, लैंडलाइन तो मुझे नहीं चीप लगती. मैं फॉर एग्जांपल PTCL का जो इंटरनेट लेता हूँ, आई पे 10,000 रुपीज पर मंथ. Now, I can't imagine how many people will be able to pay 10,000 rupees per month. Yahan Islamabad mein Airtel again, I think the cheapest connection that I see is 2,000 rupees a month. How many kids can afford 2,000 rupees a month? एक तो इंटरनेट चीप नहीं है, दूसरा ये है कि जैसे ज़ुहैर साहब ने कहा बिल्कुल कि जी, if you get off M2, so you don't find internet. So if I know lots of students who are sitting in various places like Mardan, the guy says, hey, I can't even find good internet in Mardan. Some people say they have to travel 100 miles to get the internet. So what can we do about it? What can a big company like yours do about making internet accessible?
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. We genuinely feel privileged to be in this company. Yourself, Parvez Saab, Zuhair Saab, Ibrahim Saab. I'd just like to add on to a few things that were said by the gentleman before me. Parvez Saab, Bhutan is हमारे से पीछे जो वाहिद मुल्क है दुनिया में in terms of spectrum allocation, वो Bhutan. So not something we would like to look up to, nothing demeaning about them, but again, एक ये चीज है. दूसरी सर ये internet availability. Yes, we recently celebrated this 100 million people connected to the internet thing very recently, and we called it a broadband, 100 million broadband customers. I don't think we can call it proper broadband in any way. अगर हम सारे numbers add up करें, 98 million wireless हैं और 2 million के करीब wireline. And people like myself and perhaps Parvez Saab will say that the real internet is the fixed internet. So fixed internet की penetration अगर आप देखें 220 million मुल्क के लोगों के मुल्क में, तो हम पूरे खित्ते में कंपेरेबल मुल्कों को मिला लें, हम जो एवरेज है बाकी मुल्कों की उससे 1/6 हैं. We are abysmal in fixed internet. मोबाइल और फिक्स दोनों एक दूसरे पर डिपेंड करते हैं. So yes, the number of 100 million sounds very impressive, but and it is good as well in areas like Islamabad में motorway के ऊपर, बड़े बाजारों में, in the places in the city where our commercial people, which our commercial people categorize as SECA, socio-economic class A, वहाँ पे अच्छा होगा internet, वहाँ पे सारे providers होंगे. So essentially the internet is there and it's of good quality and it's affordable for people that matter. So that is the core problem. Way back जब AT&T की deregulation हुई थी अमेरिका में, तो उस वक्त जब apart from the policy work एक चीज, एक concept introduce किया गया था, Parvez Saab would be familiar with it. It was called the provider of last resort. So if you are declared a provider of last resort in any particular geography, the FCC will not care how much you have to spend to provide connectivity. They will not care. So problems जो हैं जिस जगह पे हम हैं, they are not just the industry, the regulator, the policy makers. It's kind of all of the above. We are the telcos, us included. We are commercial organizations. Obviously, whenever you're investing something, you would like to have the quickest payback. So all commercial organizations are like that. So आपकी investments वहीं जाएंगी जहाँ पे आपका payback चलती है. So that is the sad reality of this is how all corporates work. COVID has been very good for corporates, by the way. The COVID has been very good for us. So our traffic went up by 17-18%. We have been continuously gaining customers because of the needs of people के लोगों ने घरों से काम करना है, लोगों ने इस तरह की calls पे बैठना है. दूसरी reality ये है, my wife runs a university and a women's university जहाँ पे 3-4 हज़ार के करीब बच्चियां हैं. Yes, for a certain segment of society, online education went on perfectly across time zones. हर चीज perfectly चलती रही. For the kids going to public sector universities, things did not work. Connectivity है, तो घर में device नहीं है. Power availability है. Power availability के issues हैं. अक्सर औकात जो far-flung areas, like you mentioned Swat yourself, one of your colleagues is based in Swat. Swat, AJK, Fata, even any far-flung area, tier 2, tier 3 cities जो हैं, वहाँ पे connectivity is very, very bad. So it worked for, from a distance learning perspective, it worked for a certain class of people. It did not work for the vast majority of people. Now, why is it expensive? I was in another discussion group on why things are so bad? Yeah, what are the areas for improvement? It starts with policy framework, really long-term thinking. You would think America taraqi yafta mulk hai. Obama when he took over back in 2008, so he started this broadband for all program, and it put for someone sitting in Pakistan, I was like, yeah, Amerikaiyon ko kya masla internet ka? America mein to hai sab kuch. But there was a recognition back then, a decade and a half ago, in the US, the proliferation of proper broadband. And I think back then it was, 10 megabits ko broadband define karte the, ab 25 megabit hai, and now they're talking about defining broadband as 100 megabit, which the industry is resisting. We haven't had such a policy framework. The end goal हमने कभी ये define नहीं किया. Once we define that goal and we start developing the communication sector, the internet pipe as an enabler and not as a revenue generator. लेकिन जी हमारे लिए तो revenue generator होगा. हम तो Zohair Saab has been running a company. Zohair Saab has been running companies. Obviously, when you're running a company, you're there you're there not just for you're essentially there for your shareholders. You're accountable to your shareholders. But at the same time, governments are required to ensure parity. Governments are required to ensure quality of service. 100 million है, उनकी quality of service abysmal है. Long term thinking इसलिए चाहिए जी. मैं mobile sector का अगर जिक्र करूँ spectrum के context में, spectrum सरकार का asset है. It's an intangible asset, but it is something that costs the operators a lot of money, in almost as much money as the operators would require to buy the equipment to actually effectively utilize that spectrum. So the operators, when they have to expand, they need to prioritize कि वो spectrum पे कितना spend करें, और उसके लिए अगर spectrum खरीद लेंगे तो वो hardware कहाँ से खरीदेंगे. So obviously that eventually results into poor quality of service. Likewise, fixed operators के ऊपर जो there are a lot of impediments that have hampered the growth of the fixed telecom sector. Retail perspectives से, retail broadband perspectives से. We discussed issues like consistency of regulatory policies, ROW related issues, right of way. So whenever companies like us, whenever we have to lay fiber, we have to pay a certain fee. It is supposed to be a fee, but it is actually considered as a proper profit center or revenue stream for the agencies जो हमें ये चीजें allow करती हैं. तो वो सरकार की agencies हो सकती हैं, वो ये metropolitan agencies हो सकती हैं. हमारे लिए ROW pay करना, again an intangible thing. There is no asset here. सिर्फ एक license fee है. Is a significant part of the capex we require. And as companies like
ROW क्या होता है? और सब ROW क्या है?
Right of way. So if I have to lay fiber in, let's say, along the motorway, we will have to pay the National Highway Authority a certain sum. Interesting phenomenon. छोटी सी एक चीज है. तो उसके ऊपर the enterprise itself on ROW is matured considerably, which is a shame for the country, by the way. There are segments where I mentioned something yesterday. Karachi Sharai Faisal 18-kilometer long road. There are 5 civic agencies that control that road. So you have to talk to 5 different people to pay them a certain amount. Railways, everyone. So the government on the fixed connectivity is actually hampering it themselves by not solving this problem. Taxes, affordability. आपने 10,000 के बिल की बात की. 10,000 के बिल में से 2,500 रुपया जो वो सरकार का टैक्स है, जो कि withholding tax है, जो withholding है, right? Then there are services tax as well. If you go to Punjab में additional connectivity tax. So a lot of impediments are there, which are either there due to the lack of foresight when we were thinking about these things, and secondly, the inconsistency of policies. पाकिस्तान में spectrum auction हमेशा जून में क्यों होती है? अभी हम spectrum auction कर रहे हैं. We're auctioning a tiny, small amount of spectrum. 100 megahertz spectrum अभी भी unsold पड़ा हुआ. वो किसके लिए रखा हुआ? ऑस्ट्रेलिया में 3 बड़ी कंपनीज हैं. उनका average spectrum holding, minimum spectrum holding between those 3 companies is more than the entire spectrum that has so far been sold to all of the telecom sector in Pakistan. That's it, sir, and let's carry the discussion forward then.
जी, ये बहुत सारी चीजें निकल आई हैं which unfortunately I don't understand. So I'm going to ask all of you to clarify this. ये spectrum please जोहर साहब बता दें. Spectrum क्या है और ये क्या स्पेक्ट्रम सोने की तरह निकालना पड़ता है? ये स्पेक्ट्रम क्या ऑस्ट्रेलिया अमेरिका के पास ज्यादा है, हमारे पास कम है? ये स्पेक्ट्रम को हम ऑक्शन करें कि ना करें? जोहर साहब जरा स्पेक्ट्रम को तो मिस्ट्री हमें क्लियर कर देना, क्योंकि हम जैसे लोग स्पेक्ट्रम नहीं समझते बिल्कुल.
Spectrum is a medium like radio wave scaling. I think it's probably the most appropriate आम फहम language में अगर हम बात करते हैं, radio waves है. Okay, so it's a medium which carries the signal from point A to point B, from a cell site to a switch, from a switch to cell site, and from cell site to the mobile device or the iPad that you are using. Okay, so it's, again, you can't see it, you can't touch it, it's there. अच्छा, इसके ऊपर at least for the last 28-30 years since I've been in this thing, इसके ऊपर constant बहस चलती रही है. और हम कहते हैं जी देखें वो US में इतने डॉलर पर मेगाहर्ट्ज हमने बेचा था और उस जगह में ऐसे ऑक्शन हुई थी. What we fail to understand sometimes is that we are not comparing apples to apples, right? जब US में आप स्पेक्ट्रम ऑक्शन करते हैं या यूरोप में करते हैं तो उसका जो सेल्यूलर प्रोवाइडर को एवरेज रेवेन्यू पर यूजर एक मेट्रिक होता है जो यूज करते हैं. फेमिलियर टू एवरीबॉडी ऑन दिस पैनल. हमारे यहाँ वो इस वक्त जो है वो इट्स अबाउट, if I wager to guess, it's about $1 per revenue of user per month. ठीक है जी. In the US that is probably $30 to $40. In the UK I know it's about £30. So अगर आप उसको फिर एक तरफ लेते हैं और दूसरी तरफ कहते हैं कि आप स्पेक्ट्रम भी इसी कंपैरिजन में बेचेंगे, तो you cannot do that. It doesn't work that way. जो अभी बात की है साद ने, परवेज ने पहले बात की थी, you know, the mobile operators, the fixed operators also have to get a return on investment. I was at a very, very senior forum at the NDU a few months ago, where a very senior gentleman actually said, all these mobile companies, ये बहुत पैसा बनाती हैं, or as if it was some kind of crime or sin that they were making money. So that is a mental process that we need to get out of. If somebody isn't making money, why would they want to be here? Why would they want to invest in anything, right? So it is a simple commercial proposition on the one hand. Now, we are sitting on loads of spectrum, and we need to take a long-term view. We should not say upfront money itni hai, so we can tell the real world कि ये हमने spectrum auction में दे दिया. But we should maybe do it as a pay-as-you-go formula, where we say, okay, you pay us as you earn the money, and let the operators have the spectrum so they can roll out the network faster, quicker. जैसे बात हुई कि you have to make a decision between your capital expenditure and what you pay for spectrum and what you pay for right of way. Now, those two things are completely in the control of the government, the policymakers, and it can easily be addressed. Achha, ek aur cheez jo I would like to point out, which is that, when we are sitting on, since the 2004 cellular policy came out, we invented two funds. One was called the USF Fund, the Universal Service Fund, which is also available in a lot of other emerging markets in the world. And the other one is called today the Ignite Technology Fund, previously incorporated as the ICT R&D Fund. Between the two funds, we are probably, I'm making a guess, but correct me, Parvez, you probably know better. We're sitting on something between $1 to $1.5 billion of funds in there. These are not obtained from the government or from the public or the taxpayer. These are actually contributions from the cellular and the fixed line industry. The telcos contribute 1.5% of their annual revenues to the Universal Service Fund since 2005, and 0.5% of funds from the revenues annually to the Ignite Technology Fund. अब question ये है कि what are we really doing with those funds? We have the occasional auction कि जी वो मर्दान के फलाने खित्ते में हमने एक छोटा सा network के लिए हम auction कर देते हैं. Abhi, one of the operators announced very proudly that we are now going to cover 1 million additional customers when the USF project is done. 1 million is like not even a drop in the ocean at this point in time. So we need to be more aggressive about how we deploy that fund. It is, it is controlled by the government, controlled by some, bureaucrats and policymakers who say कि नहीं इसको नहीं देना कहीं पे. इसी तरह spectrum is an asset we just need to cling on to for some reason. Whereas if you take the long-term view, the contribution from the people using the internet over the next 10 years is going to be far more to the exchequer than what you will end up obtaining from these upfront fees and levies that we are currently focused on. That's one of the propositions I have. The second one I would have is that, yes, USF fund ko ab bahut aggressively deploy kare. Ignite Technology Fund also has hundreds of millions of dollars sitting there. We should be focused on how that can be used as an enabler to talk to universities, colleges, schools. How can we do a partnership together where we can subsidize not only the internet, but also the devices on the internet and use that fund? Because there's doing nothing at this point in time. So I would put those two out as the most aggressive suggestions at this point in time. And I think if we do that and we take internet as a lifeline rather than as a luxury, I think we'll get there very quickly.
I agree with you. I think internet should be a basic human right now, given that so much of our life depends on it. Even my medical data is on internet, even my learning is on internet. So internet really has become a basic right. But going back to the spectrum a little bit, I just want to clarify this. Does America have more spectrum than us? We all have the same amount of spectrum.
Spectrum is essentially the width of a highway. So you can have a 6-lane highway.
So do we have to spend money building it, or do we have it?
No. It's there. It's in the sky. It's an intangible asset. It is.
So then why is the government not letting it out?
If I may.
So this is the right question. This is the right question.
If I may add here, does America have more spectrum than us? It's like saying, do they have more oxygen in the air than us? It's the same all over the place. Now, what is spectrum allocated? Spectrum, so it's all. I mean, the whole big range of spectrum. Now, what is spectrum allocation? Spectrum allocation is like right of way, right of way on the earth. It's right of way in the air. So you release a certain slot and say, okay, now this part of spectrum is usable. Now you bid for it. And you can use it then for 15 years. So unfortunately, वो हमारे यहाँ का somehow mindset ये है, and I agree with Saad. Mindset is a huge problem, unfortunately. That ये पैसा बना रहे हैं, as Zohair Saab said as well. ये पैसा बना रहे हैं, इनको spectrum न दो, बचा के रखो. जब scarcity create होगी, तो they will cough up with more money. So that earning of that spectrum auction fee has become the prime objective, and not what you are saying, internet for all. Yeah, internet is a human right. So there's a complete conflict over there. Short term, making money to balance the budget is the priority, rather than having internet for all as a right or whatever. Now, unfortunately, the entire telecommunications domain in Pakistan is in the hands of private sector. So this was a conscious decision taken at some point in time that this will be all privatized, and it's in the private sector. So private sector को आप enable करने के बजाय आप उसे पैसे बनाने, short term पैसे बनाने के लिए इस्तेमाल करेंगे, तो यही होगा. So that is the dilemma of spectrum. Make money as much as you can and keep it with you and not use it.
So
और वो एक अलग issue है. Not using it means losing its economic value for today when it's not used.
और
If
ये
I
सोने की
may,
तरह तो नहीं है, ये सोने की तरह तो नहीं है कि इसको आप बिस्तर के नीचे रख लें और कल को ज्यादा वैल्यू हो जाएगी या कुछ हो जाएगा।
जी,
स्पेक्ट्रम
ना
तो
सोने
यूज
की
होता
तरह
है।
है, ना ऑयल एंड गैस की तरह है कि आप
जी
इसको
जी
अभी ना
जी।
निकालें, जब प्राइस बढ़ जाएगी फिर निकालेंगे। तो
हाँ,
आज नहीं यूज किया तो वैल्यू चली गई आज की तो।
If I
जी
can give
जी
a relevant example
जी
here again from a developed country, Zuhair साहब ने US UK के आरपू का जिक्र किया 30 पाउंड. In the last auction in the UK a couple of years ago, उनका जो regulator है, उन्होंने कहा था कि वो 20% डिस्काउंट देंगे ऑन द स्पेक्ट्रम टू द ऑपरेटर जो 90% ऑफ कवरेज एरिया में x megabit per second की सर्विस गारंटी करेगा. तो essentially the government is encouraging, again, and this is the UK, far more developed than us. So they offered a discount, they offered cheaper spectrum अगर आप coverage और quality both, if you're willing to go the extra mile, we will give this resource to you cheaper. हमारे यहाँ completely opposite चीज है. So it's we have a 6-lane highway. हम अभी तक उसकी 4 lanes इस्तेमाल कर रहे हैं. हम आहिस्ता आहिस्ता करके हम उसको 6 फुट और चौड़ा कर देंगे. It's there, it has been there, but we are not letting people use it.
Still on the spectrum, let me ask you guys, please tell me, Zuhair sahab, why don't you tell me this simple thing कि जी, if I remember right, ये जो ऑक्शन हुई थी, ये 2 इकोनॉमिस्ट हैं बड़े फेमस जिन्होंने ये की थी. मुझे नाम भूल रहा है. एक तो आई थिंक वो था स्टैनफोर्ड में था, एक कोलंबिया में था, भूल गया. उन दोनों ने डिजाइन की थी ये स्पेक्ट्रम ऑक्शन. बट लेटर ऑन आई थिंक दे आल्सो, आई हैव टू चेक माय फैक्ट्स, बट आई डू रिमेंबर कि लेटर ऑन उन्होंने भी कह दिया था कि शायद दिस इज नॉट अ गुड थिंग. नाउ व्हाट आईड लाइक टू फाइंड आउट फ्रॉम यू is the whole world following the same practice of auctioning the spectrum, or are there other practices in the world?
To my knowledge, देखिए auction होती है, but the operative word here is an auction. जैसे परवेज ने highlight किया earlier on, which means कि आप एक product या एक service को वहाँ पे offer करते हैं, and then all the people in the room put a price on it, and you basically sell it to the people with the highest price. हमारे यहाँ उस तरह की auction नहीं होती, because we put a floor on it and say ये minimum है, and the minimum has always been so high. वही जो मैं बात कर रहा था, relative to the ability for the operator to earn back through the ARP mechanism, the average revenue per user, वो इतना disconnect है उन दोनों चीजों में कि it becomes meaningless. Yes, as I said, auction होती है, यूरोप में भी है, US में भी है, लेकिन उनके returns per user जो है वो बहुत फर्क है हमसे. ठीक है, एक तरफ we want to be the cheapest in the world, and we argue on it, and very rightly pointed out by a gentleman, I think Saad ne kaha tha, ki for every 100 rupees that the cellular operator charges a customer, 30 rupees is collected by the government. Not only is it the most highest taxed in the world today, but it's also the cellular operators are the most efficient tax collectors in the history of Pakistan. Because they are guaranteed to collect that. जो बाकी collectors हैं हमारे tax के, FBR के, they don't achieve the same results. So at the same time, we are taking enormous advantage, but penalizing at the same time through these massive, thought process of very high spectrum prices, right-of-way prices. अभी एक नई policy आई है right-of-way पे. I haven't had an update कि वो कहाँ तक successful हुई है, but it was only implemented like 6 to 8 weeks ago. So the issue is constantly the mindset and the short-term thinking of the policymakers, of the regulators, and we need to, that is the dialogue we really need to have, is how do we change that mindset? How do we explain that this is a long-term process? Think 20 years, not 2 years. And if we can start doing that, I think you will begin to change the paradigm.
एक और question on the spectrum मुझे बता दें. ये I think you mentioned pay as you go, but let me ask you, Professor, can we simply have a public-private partnership rather than a spectrum auction? Can't the spectrum be given to you guys and you share profits with the government? You can pay the government 50%, 30%, I don't know, whatever figure is negotiated. Isn't that a better way to do it rather than try and extract the price up front? Will that work, or is there
certainly
something wrong with that approach?
Certainly, that is an approach where the government can get a reasonably good price. The problem is that auction has somehow become, over the period of time, the method of getting determined what the best price of the spectrum is. And auction is done in many countries. There's nothing new. I mean, as Wirsab said, it is all over the world. I mean, it's like, famous Churchill saying that democracy is the worst type of government, but show me a better form of government. So the thing is, auction is probably the best best method to determine what the best price is. But the problem starts when you set a very high floor price. And of course, then the payment terms. So for floor price, I'm going to discuss currently. Payment terms is related to the question that you have just raised. Yes, you can ask them to pay upfront, as we do. And we do give them a possibility of a payment over 5 years, but then we charge a heavy interest, KIBOR plus something interest on that. So that's not really a big incentive. So yes, why not? Why not tell them, okay, this is the price now. The price has been determined, but you have to pay it as you go. You don't have to pay it upfront in this way. This, I think, can be done and can be a very, very efficient way of. The problem starts when the government wants to meet its fiscal deficit of that particular year with the auction, spectrum auction proceeds, and I think somehow that has to be stopped.
Ibrahim Saab, you are a financial man. Zara bataiye कि all the auction does is securitize future earnings. So why can't the government just simply figure this out? Instead of securitizing the future earnings and collecting upfront, just collect the earnings as they go and ease the business, because ultimately we want to provide everybody with internet. So bataiye kya khayal hai aapka? Is that possible?
Bilkul, absolutely. Just my previous colleagues, I think they're more experts in their respective domains and much have seen the sector more closely. I think hum spectrum pe baat kar rahe hain. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Zuhair Saab and Hafiz Saab. I think spectrum is one thing. License renewals are another thing. इसके अलावा R&D के ऊपर मजीद investments होती हैं. आपके capex development वगैरह के उसके ऊपर होती है. So there are multiple touch points, and I think as just an having interest in this sector, and I've been reading something. Maybe I think there have been discussions going on in the past between the government and the service providers. License renewal fee जो होती है आपकी जो spectrum होती है वो dollars पे charge होती है. हम जो consumer से charge कर रहे होते हैं, that is in PKR. So the exchange rate parity in a way. So there are multiple issues, but at the same time, we definitely have to have those dialogues as to how we can do that, because as I think Parvez Saab mentioned, if we keep on doing this, we will definitely lose a lot, because the potential is there. And although just मैंने पहले भी बात कही थी कि COVID के हवाले से there has been a kind of a fast track on adopting digital technology. Very recently, Amazon has listed Pakistan as one of its seller countries. Facebook has recently announced that they have partnered with one of the broadband partners to provide access to 10 to 15 million. So things are going in the right direction. So, but at the same time, there has to be a collaborative dialogue between the government and the service providers. Kis tarah se hum internet ko hum kar sakte hain. Of course, we understand that it's a revenue generation for the exchequer and the government. But at the same time, we need to work collaboratively, because it should be treated as a necessity, as a luxury item.
अच्छा जी, let me also now with the spectrum में एक और बात आपसे पूछ लूं आप लोगों से कि ये towers का क्या मसला है? Why is it that all you companies have individual towers? मुझे याद है American Towers एक कंपनी है जिसका मैंने एक जमाने में स्टॉक भी लिया था. वो सारे towers वो मैनेज करती है. Why are you companies managing towers? And why can't you share towers? And the same thing applies to fiber optic. आप right away की बात करते हैं. Again, all of you want individual lines. Why can't you share lines? Why can't, I mean, is this me as an economist practicing unrealistic things, or is it realistic? बताइए. Who would like to say? Parvez Saab, बताइए.
Yeah, Parvez Saab, बताइए.
This is something where we need to bash the operators. Not the government. Because sir, they have been treating, and I must say, Zohair Saab should share the blame. In the beginning, the companies have been treating having tower as a competitive advantage. So why should you share your competitive advantage with anybody else? So everybody started putting his own towers, and the problem was that unless when a time came when everybody had enough towers and there was no competitive advantage in that, people realized कि oh ये तो गलत हो गया. Let's now do it now. Hand over the towers to a tower operator, because they also exist like American Towers. You said Indus Towers is another one. In India, they own 100,000 plus towers in India and a few countries. So Pakistan, we have about 40,000 towers. So when they started doing that, so we found out, or the industry found out, that it is not so easy. If you want to sell your towers, your assets to somebody else, there are huge tax implications. So some of the deals actually didn't go through because of the tax implications. So now somehow people are stuck.
You explain what tax implications are. What tax implications?
So when you sell your asset, you have to pay heavy tax. So if you sell off your towers to a tower company, that is like selling any asset. So I'm not a tax expert, so I can't explain in detail, but there are tax implications due to which the tower assets could not be sold, or have not been able to sell. By the way, all the new towers or new sites that are being installed have the towers are from the tower cos. There is a tower share company, and there is E.co, and there is now Engro has created a subsidiary called Infrashare and things like that. So same is the case in optic fibers. Now, optic fibers, there are two kinds of operators. There are service providers and there are infrastructure providers. Now, service providers, Pakistan में ही अब तक अपनी fiber बिछाते रहे हैं. So one service provider, when he lays a cable, he does not want to share it with another service provider. Obviously, उसका competitive advantage है. And unfortunately, उससे ये होता है कि वो multiple fibers बिछते हैं. मेरी street में इस्लामाबाद में 3 fiber हैं इस वक्त. PTCL का है, Neatel का है, और एक I don't know Transworld का है या Storm Fiber का है, one of them, and the fourth one is about to come. So service providers don't share their assets because of the competition issues. Infrastructure providers, on the other hand, are basically providers of infrastructure for the service providers. So उनके लिए end customer नहीं, उनके लिए service provider customer होता है. So hopefully this is now the infrastructure providers are actually gaining ground. There are few places where they have started. The government again needs to give some incentives, and this sharing problem will be resolved through that, because we have a lot of fiber to deploy still. We are very, very very much behind in that.
ठीक. अच्छा, मुझे किसी ने कहा, again I may be wrong, मुझे बताइए, should we spread fiber everywhere? Yeah, I checked with somebody in California, Silicon Valley guy who does your kind of work. वो कहता है कि now you can probably bypass the fiber and go to 5G straight and make the country 5G, and that will, in a sense, be cheaper.
So,
now,
if I may, yes, eventually 5G obviously is very, very fast service, very low latency, very quick. So you can back and forth जो data है वो literally real time में नजर आता है. You can have उसके जो use cases जिनकी promotion की जाती है, उसमें surgery भी remote की जा रही होती है, और band के लोग फर्क कमरों में बैठ के कर रहे होते हैं. They all appear to be sitting in the same room. 5G also requires fiber. So 5G जो है वो again जो spectrum है वो थोड़ा higher frequencies का, जितना higher frequencies में जाते जाएंगे आपको end user के उतना करीब होते जाना पड़ेगा. अब जितना करीब होंगे आपको हार्डवेयर और ज्यादा चाहिए होगा. तो वो जो लास्ट सर्विंग एलिमेंट है, जो बेस स्टेशन अगर आप कंसिडर करें, उसको सर्व करने के लिए फिर भी फाइबर चाहिए। तो कस्टमर के ज्यादा करीब जाने के लिए जो मोबाइल ऑपरेटर्स हैं उनको हार्डवेयर बहुत ज्यादा चाहिए, उतनी बैंडविड्थ कैरी करने के लिए, उसको फीड करने के लिए फाइबर फिर भी चाहिए। तो 5G obviously will take up very very quickly. It has started to take up in countries like South Korea and a few other places, but the need for fiber will not go away. It will remain there.
But does it offer us a leapfrogging opportunity?
Ji?
Does it offer us a leapfrogging opportunity?
If we are able to somehow again go back to the earlier part of the discussion and sort out the spectrum discussion once and for all, and not in bits and pieces. So we keep coming back to that discussion. उसके अलावा देखें इंडस्ट्री के अंदर रिकग्निशन है, जो अब टावर शेयरिंग की आपने बात की, yes, the industry started 2 decades ago in a certain way, और obviously सारे competitors थे. Tower sharing is something जिस पे कि इंडस्ट्री अब united है. People want to do this. It is being hampered by for other reasons, and having the operators still having the industry not come up with a viable model कि वो टावर शेयरिंग enable हो और ऑपरेटर्स का कैश फ्री अप हो, वो इन्वेस्टमेंट्स को लिमिट कर रहा है. अगेन उसमें भी थोड़ा लालच था सिविक अथॉरिटीज का, 5 खंभों पे आप 5 दफा फीस लेंगे, और अगेन अगर आप एक जगह लगे, एक जगह खंभे हमेशा उस जगह लगेंगे जहाँ पे पॉपुलेशन सेंटर्स हैं. सो अगर मोबिलिंग ने एक जगह लगाया तो उसके बाद यूफोन आया, उन्होंने भी वहीं लगाना है क्योंकि लोग वहां रहते हैं, खपत वहां पे. तो ऑब्वियसली फिर वो चीजें उस तरह होंगी. तो वो इट वाज यूज्ड फॉर एज अ मनी मेकिंग अपॉर्चुनिटी फॉर अ वेरी लॉन्ग टाइम. रेगुलेटरी फोरसाइट अगर होती उस वक्त भी, तो it could have been stopped at the second operator or the third operator. The government could have mandated कि नहीं, no more towers at all. Figure this out amongst yourself. So वो भी eventually industry ने फिर figure out करना शुरू किया.
अच्छा, ये बताइए कि ये जो मतलब let's come to a little bit of the cost. अगर let's say government adopt कर ले ये agenda कि the internet is the right and we have to make it available to all, and that it's right now 10,000 rupee internet or even 2,000 rupee internet is dividing the country. So अगर ये करे government, तो क्या cost आएगा? What are the costs are we talking about? Are we talking about trillions of dollars, or या ये internet for all लगाना, जो fiber बात कर रहे हैं, 5G बात कर रहे हैं, जो भी कुछ ये options हैं, इनमें कितना cost आएगा? Let's say if the government had to do this.
So the government does not have to do. So government is only required to remove the impediments जो spectrum related हैं, जो fixed assets जो आपने fiber जो डालना है उससे related जो हैं, उनको government ने खत्म करना है. वो automatically अगर आप एक significant amount spectrum के केस में almost 40% of investments of an operator goes into the spectrum part, बाकी hardware पे लगती है. अगर आप वो निकाल देंगे तो ऑब्वियसली ये चीज ऑटोमेटिकली ऑपरेटर्स के पास कैश फ्री अप हो जाएगा कि वो एक्चुअल उस एसेट पे पैसा खर्च करें जिससे पैसे उन्होंने जनरेट करने हैं. द सेम अप्लाइज टू फिक्स्ड ऑपरेटर्स एज वेल. दूसरी चीज जो सरकार कर सकती है वो ये है कि सर्विस कॉरिडोर्स का कॉन्सेप्ट हमने डिस्कस नहीं किया. सो फॉर पीपल लाइक मी जो कि फिक्स सेक्टर में है, जो ये 4 दफा परवेज साहब ने जिक्र किया कि उनकी गली खुदी है, वो 4 दफा इसलिए खुदी है कि चारों दफा जो सिविक अथॉरिटी है उसको चारों दफा फीस मिली है. जो सिविक अथॉरिटीज आज भी शहर डेवलप कर रहे हैं, या टाउन प्लानिंग है, या प्रोविंशियल गवर्नमेंट्स के लेवल पे या फेडरल गवर्नमेंट के लेवल पे, अभी भी ये मैंडेट नहीं है, अभी भी ये फोरसाइट नहीं है कि जब एक नई डेवलपमेंट हो रही है, जब एक नई हाईवे बन रही है, तो वहां पे साथ ही एक सर्विस कॉरिडोर भी डिफाइन कर दिया जाए. और उसके बाद जिसने फाइबर डालना है वो एक सड़क के नीचे एक सीमेंटेड पाथ पे है अवेलेबल. यू जस्ट ओपन अप अ मैन होल एंड थ्रो योर फाइबर इन. उससे क्या होगा? उससे एक तो आप उसकी फी आप ले लें, उसकी फी आप बिल्कुल ले लें, क्योंकि फाइन सरकार का हक है फी लेने का, लेकिन नॉमिनल सी फी लें उसकी. उससे फायदा ये होगा कि जो रोल आउट है हम लोगों का वो बहुत तेज हो जाएगा. एक 10 किलोमीटर की सड़क खोदना, फिर उसको बंद करना, फिर उसको रिस्टोर करना, और 10 किलोमीटर का फाइबर एक एग्जिस्टिंग डक्ट के अंदर फेंकना, जमीन आसमान का फर्क है कॉस्ट में भी और टाइम में भी. तो ये बेसिक कुछ फंडामेंटल्स हैं. अगर ये गवर्नमेंट हाई लेवल पे रिजॉल्व कर ले तो ये चीजें काफी तेजी से बढ़ सकती हैं.
if I may, नदीम, जो अभी आपने सवाल पूछा था, तो जब आप बात करते हैं कि what will it cost, देखिए I can't calculate a number off the top of my
but
head.
ballpark figures.
But the real issue is coming back to what I said earlier. The Universal Service Fund, by definition, it means it provides universal service to all. जो हम बात कर रहे हैं, internet for all की बात कर रहे हैं, ठीक है? Now there is enough funding in there, just in the one fund, to allow for absolutely, wall-to-wall internet ability in Pakistan. That means fiber cable dalna or right-of-way ko solve karna is perfectly affordable. It is a policy issue which holds this up. It is the the thinking and the process of कि जी इसको अभी काबू करना है, इसमें से पैसा निकालना है. That is the issue. If we can deploy those funds, we are able to solve this issue.
So basically what you're saying is that $1 billion that's in the Universal Services Fund is enough. तो हम तो सड़कें ही बना रहे हैं ज़ोहर साहब, हम तो सड़कें बना रहे हैं पता नहीं कितने $100 बिलियन की, तो ये तो बड़ा आसान काम लग रहा है.
तो असल सड़क तो ये सड़क
असल सड़क ये एग्जैक्टली
तो सारा हम पीछे रह जाएंगे.
Sir, if I may,
please go ahead.
I think the government needs to spend no money. Yes, USF money, of course, which is about, according to my information, about 100 billion rupees. So it's a little less than $1 billion.
Slightly less than
anyway, so that is of course that is neat. That USF is nowadays, of course, spending some money. In between, it was quite dormant. But the beauty of this sector being entirely in the hands of private sector is that the government doesn't have to spend anything. What the government has to do is, of course, enable and encourage and incentivize. Usme government ka nuksan in terms of what the government is earning from the sector, yes, that will happen. Just take an example of the customs duties now. Customs duties on telecommunications equipment, again, one of the highest. Fiber optics पे sir duty जो है सारी regulatory और ये वो जो duties सब मिला ली जाए तो it's 29%. Now this is all only custom duty. Now we on top of that we come with other duties, other taxes. So 29% includes those duties which were originally brought in for luxury items. So if optic fiber is considered to be a luxury item, it is pathetic. क्या कहें उसके बारे में? So the government may lose on that part, on the part of getting revenues. For example, एक और है example के government declared or decided to declare, although we are in our discussion we are using the word industry, but FBR does not recognize telecommunications as industry. Oops. So all those incentives and concessions that the industry enjoys are not available to telecommunication. And by the way, the government decided to call it an industry or declare it as an industry was in 2004, 17 years ago. Till today, telecommunications from the taxation point of view is not considered, is not treated as industry. So what I'm saying is that the government may lose money, of course, to some extent, but the government doesn't have to spend any money. No billions of dollars have to be spent by the government.
बिल्कुल सही कह रहे हैं कि देखें 2004 से ये pursuit था कि somehow we need to declare the telecom industry as an industry as a whole. जैसे textile industry है, जैसे cement industry है, etc. बाकी सारे हैं. वो आज तक, we are whatever 16, 17 years on. It's not something that's been accepted.
Achaji, another question that I quickly like to raise is about the devices. Pakistan has now decided that it wants to do cars on telephones. We've decided we're going to protect our cell phone industry, which has come up, and lots of people are going to assemble cell phones. Are you comfortable with this? Is this going to make all of us a Suzuki country, or are we going to be? I'll leave it up to you to complete that sentence. बताइए, कौन बोलेगा पहले? ज़ोहर साहब बताइए.
देखिए, I've never been in favor of any kind of protectionist measures for anything. अगर local industry ने काम करना है, they need to be competitive with the rest of the world and get there. And exactly वही simile जो आपने cars के बारे में की है, we produce some of the most pathetic cars in the world today. From, I'm sorry to say, the जो दो बड़ी companies हैं, and yet we charge, I don't know, the prices are, you could buy a nice BMW in London for the same price. But so that has not really worked to anybody's advantage. It hasn't certainly meant that the customer can get a cheaper handset agar aap unko protection denge. They need to learn to survive in an international world where everything is free. And if somebody can import something for cheaper, well and good. The issue should be, can we serve the customer in the right way?
Again, masla yahi aa jata hai ki ji, is a computer or a mobile phone a luxury good? Is it for watching YouTube, or is it a tool for advancement? क्योंकि मैं गया हफीज सेंटर recently कंप्यूटर लेने, तो I was shocked कि I saw कि लंडे के कंप्यूटर पड़े, and I use the term लंडा advisedly. वो कहते हैं हम consignments में कंप्यूटर्स लाते हैं 2013-14 के मॉडल, और वो हम आपको बेच रहे हैं on a I wonder कि क्या होगा हमारा जब हमारे बच्चे 7 साल पुराना कंप्यूटर यूज कर रहे हैं, और मोर्स लॉ आप सब मेरे से बेहतर जानते हैं कि मोर्स लॉ कहती है कंप्यूटिंग स्पीड डबल्स एवरी ईयर. तो ये तो फिर हम तो बहुत पीछे रह जाएंगे अगर कि ये हिसाब होगा. एंड राइट नाउ प्राइम मिनिस्टर इज टॉकिंग अबाउट $8 billion अर्निंग फ्रॉम ई एक्सपोर्ट्स. तो अगर के ये हमने निजाम बनाया जहां डिवाइसेस नहीं आ रही, इंटरनेट भी महंगा है, तो हम क्या करेंगे? परवेज साहब बताइए.
So it's a good question, but at the same time, to be honest, I don't have an answer, because हमने देखा sir, neighboring countries में Bangladesh and India, two countries which benefited a lot by raising their taxes for the mobile phones, and thus incentivizing the investors who were actually moving out of China. Now there was a time, in fact, I think still it's there, that mobile phone manufacturers decided to move out of China because of two reasons. One, labor cost बढ़ गई है China में, and the other was that Trump's initiated sanctions. Anything produced in China invited 20% duty, when same thing produced in Bangladesh or India or Vietnam would not. So that resulted, I mean, Indians, what they did was they, one, that they had the duties on the phones. Second, they started giving 4% incentive to exports. Consequently, now the biggest manufacturing plant of Samsung phones is in India, out of Korea, I mean, other than the home country. So Bangladesh last year exported phones. Now their duties, by the way, on mobile phones are actually higher than us, far higher. So you're right, this might lead to Suzuki, but I think Suzuki or mobile phone में एक difference ये है कि mobile phone, you cannot manufacture 4-year-old mobile phone. Even the components would not be available for that. So this will have to go along with the time. But you are right. I mean, on the other side, the biggest, because the reason why I said I don't have an answer, the biggest impediment to somebody adopting internet in Pakistan today, the biggest barrier is the device price. As I said, the tariffs are affordable. Pakistan is considered to be one of the most affordable countries as far as tariffs are concerned. There is a alliance for internet affordability. According to their report, we are among the top 10 affordable countries. But the handset is not affordable. I mean, I'm talking of smartphone now. I'm not talking of normal handset. So smartphone is the biggest impediment for somebody going on internet. So on one side, yes, if we need to manufacture, at least assembly actually leads to more things. You start making the power charger. You start making the earphones. I mean, you gradually go up the ladder. So on one side, yes, it is good to have taxes or duties on the imported phone, especially the the most expensive phones. iPhone is never going to come to Pakistan, so it's useless to do it. But anyway, on the other side, there is argument for not doing it. So it's a bit confusing situation. I think Durrani Amir wants to do.
जी आमिर साहब बोलिए.
थैंक्स परवेज. ये नदीम तो मुझे कोई बोलने नहीं देता, तुम्हारी वजह से मुझे इजाजत मिल गई.
मैंने जान के तुम्हें नहीं बोलने दिया था अभी तक. बोलने.
अच्छा. Anyway, sir, I have questions for this very illustrious panel. I mean, they concern all the various. So let's start with the brand issue, right? The sale of basically the bandwidth. I mean, I'm an infrastructure person, and so infrastructure principles on connectivity basically look at all infrastructure that connects one to another, whether it be electrons flowing, whether it be goods flowing on a vehicle across a highway. So or even the railway, even take the air corridors. You know, the ATC allows you on certain air highways. You don't sell your air, you don't sell your land, you don't. But somehow we sell the bandwidth, which makes no sense at all, right? The bandwidth should be used as a right of way, right? So the government is always omnipresent in a way that you lease a right of way, and then you give certain abilities for the right of way, what you can do on the right of way, what you cannot do on the right of way. Look at the, there is so those of you who are not familiar, go and look at More, for example, the Islamabad motorway, the service that provides then maintains the road. So essentially what that happens is that if you do a right-of-way based approach with the bandwidth, you end up having all the ancillary kind of advantages. So there is no one-time sale. You have it's in an escrow account, as in the case of the motorways. In the case of the airways, again, it's pay as you go. You fly over me, you use my highway, you pay for it as you go. So I think there is no harm in giving that same incentive to the telecom industry. The second thing I want to say is on the services corridor. You see, even in a city like Dushanbe, where I'm working currently and have been since the last 10 years, we are now moving the government, despite it being very heavy-handed on what we can do or not do vis-a-vis connectivity, especially with broadband. The concept of this common or shared utility services, right? So as I think it was either Mr. Baraj or somebody else mentioning the fact that, you dig one trench, which is maintained. So you not only lower the capex, but you also lower the opex on this, because it's about opening a gutter. I mean, I'll give you an example. I was riding back from Punjab, from the border, and I was looking at the CPEC new fiber, right? I did not see no maintenance points, right? I mean, so somebody has had the idiocy of actually burying it over lengths. There must be some connection places where you can open it, but I did not see that very advanced infrastructure utilities, common shared utilities, placement space approach, which people here talked about. Now, why are we not doing that? It can't be simply because you have to pay CD or somebody again and again. I think it's also got to do with the greed and lack of foresight of the providers themselves, which then brings me to my third question, which is on the shared towers. Now, basically, I think it is criminal right now, especially for the areas where internet access has not been provided, that we are not using shared infrastructure. I mean, why does SCO limit, usage or common usage up in Gilgit-Baltistan? I know there are political problems, but they've opened other services. Why can't they open these? Related to this question is the question of USF. I thought that, and I argued this with Abid Hassan when the World Bank paid for set up this whole project. The USF, who has USF? I worked 9 years in Afghanistan. I still go there. Parvez, do they work on USF? They have better coverage than we do. In fact, I'm quite saddened that sometimes I go very long. So I can get all the Afghan telcos and they're available there. Now, so it must be driven by some other factor than the fact that, no, we must have a universal service fund. Why don't we have other mechanisms of providing all-out coverage? Or around tariffs, I think that Zohair Saab and this whole concept of industry, I think, is now passé. One of the things that we must do is simply go against the tariffs, because industries ki jo definition pad gayi hai for 30 years. Every person that I've talked to in my times at the World Bank or otherwise, हमें इंडस्ट्री बना दे ये तो बेसिक एक प्रॉब्लम है ना दूसरी साइड व्हाट डू यू वांट टू गेट एज एन इंडस्ट्री basically here right now I see a problem with tariffs. I think there should be a war on tariffs which Nadeem has already started. So I think last positives on handsets. I think मैं कल नदीम साहब sorry आपको नहीं पता लगा मैं अवारागर्दी करने गया हुआ था. So me and my wife were on a motorcycle up in Chiga Gully and across. Every little boy had a smartphone handset. I think there is a very vibrant second hand and or third hand or fourth hand market working because I stopped and I saw this boy with no underpants and he was holding and listening. This is a 10-year-old boy. And I said, kitne ka liya hai? Kehta ji, 1000 rupaye ka liya hai. So, you know, the thing is, I think because we don't go out and we don't talk to people, that I don't have a single service provider. Aap androone shahar Lahore mein chale jaye, kahin chale jaye. Everyone has a smartphone handset. I want to understand why do they think the smartphone access is a problem. हम बताते नहीं है second hand market को काबू नहीं किया हुआ third hand market को काबू नहीं किया हुआ. I'll stop here, but these are some 5 basic areas.
Thank you, folks. Anybody wants to take up the questions? Who wants to go? Bataiye.
Sir, if I can comment on a couple of things. There are some handsets hain, and there is a vibrant second-hand handsets market as well. The question is the ability of the telcos to deliver a quality service to that handset. And that comes back to the spectrum related discussion. I completely agree with the point that you made about service corridors or spectrum leasing wala concept. वो obviously वो चीजें होनी चाहिए. I'm not aware of which particular cable route you were talking about the CPEC के हैं. वो जो मेंटेनेंस पॉइंट्स होते हैं वो they're not very visible. They're not supposed to be visible क्योंकि apart from other things हमारे यहाँ जो ऑपरेटर्स के लिए एक और चैलेंज होता है कि वो अभी भी हमारा नेटवर्क बहुत कॉमनली कटता रहता है क्योंकि people open up our hand holes and man holes and hope कि वहां पे उनको कॉपर मिल जाएगा और ऑब्वियसली उनको पता नहीं चलता कि उसमें कॉपर है या नहीं है. वो तार काट के देखते हैं वो. तो हैंड होल्स होते हैं नेटवर्क में एट रेगुलर डिस्टेंस क्योंकि अदरवाइज वो मेंटेन नहीं किया जा सकता. अदरवाइज यू हैव टू डिग अप थिंग्स अगेन अगर कोई ना कोई इंसिडेंट हो जाए तो. बट दे आर नॉट वेरी विजिबल. वो सड़क के साथ बिल्कुल अलाइंड होते हैं वो. द अदर क्वेश्चंस ऑब्वियसली इंटरेस्टिंग है. ज़ोहैर साहब या परवेज साहब अगर कमेंट करना चाहें उसके ऊपर.
जी प्लीज परवेज साहब गो अहेड.
On the topic of spectrum, Amir, I think you're a little mistaken. The spectrum is not sold as such. It is leased out for a certain period of time, not typically 15 years, and it is like a right of way. And the operator is supposed to operate his services within that corridor that is allocated to him.
You don't take bulk costs. You don't take bulk costs from either the airlines or the highway service providers or anybody. So that was my simile. Sorry for saying sale. Huh? I want to.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I was coming to that. So airlines may okay. There's a slight difference that an aircraft will pass belonging to one airline and then another will pass belonging to another airline. Here you have a 24/7 communication going on. Even if when you're not using your phone, it's connected. So it's virtually connected. So that particular corridor has to be with one operator all the time. So, but you're right. Having said that, I agree with you that there should be no upfront cost. It can still be the cost which is charged on usage basis. By the way, spectrum usage by different operators now is also possible. Technology has made it possible. This is called dynamic spectrum allocation, where spectrum is allocated dynamically. But that is something which we don't have yet in Pakistan. So
I'm sorry, like,
in many
this
countries.
is a very sensitive issue, and मैं नदीम को चाहता हूँ कि he understands what I'm saying. नदीम साहब आपको याद है, there are 2 ways to do supply of. अगर आप कहते हैं ना एक corridor आप पूरा दे दें, या आप multiple operators कहें कि इस frequency इस पे operate करे, so you can compete for a region. So same thing now applies. You should allow multiple operators to be competing on the same frequency, which is now possible. So that's my point.
Fair enough.
Gee, that is a very, very new technology that is possible theoretically, but practically, we are still a little bit away from that. In some countries, they have started experimenting with this. So this is dynamic spectrum allocation is something which is which is brand new. Anyway, but this will be possible, and I don't know what the authorities will do to earn money then, because then it will be more difficult. You know, it will have to be on use basis. Your
So
other
that's
point was about.
sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
Your other was point about the service corridor. I fully agree with you. Saad said so as well. There should be service corridors. The problem is that optic fiber is not like it is like, but maybe not so much like a water pipe. So it is more technical. It's more it's more sophisticated from that point of view. So you need, even within that service corridor, you need somebody who is more proficient at that. So that could be the so-called infrastructure provider. That's what we have in telecom infrastructure provider, and there are licensees of that. There are 19 licenses given out by PTA to telecom infrastructure providers. So that was my point right in the beginning, that we have to encourage them so that many more service providers can ride on the same fiber. Again, the same concept. So if we have a fiber belonging to a telecom infrastructure provider, it will be possible for many service providers to use that. Whereas right now in Pakistan, 99% of the fiber is owned by service providers themselves. So obviously nobody else can ride them, and you have to lay one after the other after the other.
Ji, Baraj Sahab, you want to say something?
I think Ji, go ahead. Sorry.
Ji, I completely agree. Ji, fiber की भी sharing होनी चाहिए. One of the reasons वो जो 5 towers वाली बात थी, उसी तरह की story पाकिस्तान में fibers वाली भी हुई है कि when Mobilink wanted to build their core network, PTCL refused to give them the access to the existing fiber. Again, same story. ये चीजें भी कुछ चीजें पॉलिसी लेवल पे शुरू से डिसाइड होनी चाहिए थी कि कोर नेटवर्क्स लिमिटेड रहेंगे. So, but having said that, now we are at a stage where the operators have started sharing, at least at the core and the metro level, they've started sharing their networks and trying to, instead of giving out the complete pipe to the other operator, have started carrying capacity for the other operator. So that model has started. Again, it has to be commercially viable for the company that's built the infrastructure, but that model has started. Another interesting model that we probably should talk about some other time. Dr. Mirai, I need to leave in about 5 minutes. I think it's yeah. So the other very interesting topic in terms of the growth of fixed telecom is this concept of having independent infrastructure companies. Parvez Saab can talk a lot about this. In smaller towns and cities. So the concept of having a large netco, which is a company like PTCL, which gets bandwidth from the outside world through submarine fibers, so submarine cables, has a network, a very high-speed network, which is spread across different cities. And then customer के घर जाने के लिए last mile के लिए एक shared company हो सकती है. Company can be owned by a completely neutral entity. A company can be owned by the city, जो के at the time of build out हर customer के घर तक fiber पहुंचा दे. और again, जो हम sharing की बात कर रहे हैं, resource sharing की बात कर रहे हैं, managed capacity की बात कर रहे हैं, वो last mile वाली चीज वो company कर सकती है. That is another model which is being discussed in one way or the other. Parvez Saab and I have had a few discussions on this. Proliferation बढ़ाने के लिए, broadband के लिए, affordability बढ़ाने के लिए ये मॉडल भी eventually पाकिस्तान को एक्सप्लोर करना पड़ेगा. उसमें दोनों का फायदा है. हमारी इन्वेस्टमेंट लिमिट हो जाती है और हमारी एरिया ऑफ फोकस स्लाइटली डिफरेंट हो जाता है और कस्टमर के घर जाने वाली कंपनियां कोई भी हो सकती हैं. इट कुड बी अस एज वेल.
Zohaib Saab, you were saying something?
No, I think what we are referring to here is what is commonly known in the trade as the last mile. So yes, you have the common optic fiber to the curb, and then you have the last mile to the customer's home. Yes, very feasible, very doable. I've lived a long time in the UK. That is a common practice there, where people do this, कि वो एक shared cable network है, and the last mile is to your home, and anybody can come in and do that. If I needed to change from operator A to B tomorrow, the other one would simply, the technician would literally, in today's world, come and do a little plug, and that would be the end of it. So, I mean, we are a long way from there at this point in time. We are talking utopia, hopefully maybe 5 to 7 years from now. But I'll come back to the same issue again. I think our issues are so much more core and so much more doable today without all the, I mean, देखें ये सारी चीजें very nice to have हैं, बाकी दुनिया में हैं. Let's focus on the core. The core is utilizing our existing spectrum asset efficiently, very quickly. ये जो अभी बात आमिर दुरानी ने भी की है about it's a pay as you go concept, which I emphasized much earlier. एक तो वो करना है हमने, और दूसरा USF और Ignite Technology Fund के जो funds पड़े हुए हैं, उनको intelligently हमने deploy करना है for the good of internet for all. That's really my message at this stage. बाकी देखें are all lovely things to have for later on.
One quick last question. Do we have a broadband or an internet policy? I see one on the net, but that's 2004. Is there an updated policy at all? So, I mean,
there was a telecommunications policy in 2015. 15.
Professor, broadband policy revised हो रही है, अभी तक वो हुई नहीं है. So
I'm coming to that.
I'm
coming to that. 2015 telecommunications policy was supposed to include broadband. It does include broadband. Let me put it that way. The new one, which is 2021, it is right now being formulated, and it is undergoing stakeholders consultations. In fact, I am a little part of it from the World Bank side. So that is in the formulation stage.
So the World Bank is drafting the policy?
No, sir. In fact, that is the big issue. World Bank refuses to draft the policy, but they are giving their assistance and help in getting best practices from across the world and comparing, and then whatever the draft is, giving their comments and things like that.
It's being done with in consultation with the industry.
One last question from the floor. Galaxy A71 कौन है भाई? बोलें जल्दी से, then we'll close. Everybody has to go.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Nadeem sir, for actually, spearheading this really important discussion. I'm Gul, and I work on internet governance issues in my own capacity. My question is, because we have heads of some really big telecom companies sitting here today, I think that the issue, if there is a policy being made right now, I think the issue of net neutrality, especially vis-a-vis how big tech companies, in the guise of access to internet, have those special data packages, which a lot of our telecom companies give for free to their customers. And that is the zero-rated services, which are, the concept of internet for all doesn't really fit in there, because then it's a very selective kind of internet for those who are using, for example, Mobilink or Telenor connections to use WhatsApp or Facebook. So that is one area, because India had a very successful campaign against the zero-rated services, and they were able to tell all these big companies that if you have to give those zero-rated services, it should be probably a package for internet where they can use any site that they want, instead of just the ones that the telecos or the big or the investors allow. So are we looking at net neutrality issues in the policy that we are making?
Let's go to somebody. Please also explain net neutrality to us. Don't think that we know this. Please बताइए.
I think
Parvez
let me explain. Net neutrality is where where people have access to any internet website or any destination that is on the internet, and they pay, or they have to pay for that connection equally, which means not that one site is offered to you free of charge, so that gets somehow an unfair advantage. And on the so Facebook, for example, I think it will be clear with an example. Facebook offers this so-called, there's a name given to it. So it's a basic internet, and you can access Facebook on certain telecommunication provider networks, and you will not be charged for that. So if I use Telenor, for example, I think Telenor has got an agreement with Facebook. If I use Telenor, and I access Facebook, the Facebook will not be the Facebook that we are used to. It will be, of course, a downgraded version of that. But then I have free access to that Facebook. So now the debate is whether that should be allowed or not allowed. In some countries, it's not allowed because it is considered to be against net neutrality. And in some countries, it is allowed because they say that let people get introduced to some kind of internet. And once they are aware of that, and Facebook claims that 30% of the people who use free Facebook, they ultimately start using the internet as a whole. So that means start paying. So there's a debate. In some countries, it's blocked. The Facebook is not allowed, for example, to do this in India. But we have not done anything like that. We allow it. So, but there are two schools of thought, and there are pros and cons.
Yeah,
I know the Supreme Court gave a decision against net neutrality as well in the US. So anyway, any last words, folks, or shall we close? If there's any last words from the panel? No? Okay, great. Thank you, folks. I've learned a lot, and we shall, inshallah, be transcribing this and putting it out, and we will give the government some kind of a policy paper. We hope that we'll work with you to get internet for all. Thank you. All the best.
thank you.
I deeply appreciate your giving us the time. Khuda Hafiz.